Today we're going to look at traditional project management and agile project management in a visual manner to make a couple of discoveries. So let's begin by looking at a traditional project in kind of a visual way where we have, I'm drawing out a timeline here where the project is underway and it kind of has this long skinny shape. And the reason it does, of course, is because the people working on it, our resources, may very well be working on multiple things at the same time. And so we have two of these underway, and we see that we have analysis occurring in both of these. And that continues on for a period of time. Undoubtedly, it varies by project. There will be some design that goes underway as well. Again, this will be project specific in terms of how much is required. There will be some coding. Perhaps this is quite a lengthy piece in this one, and the coding might be small, but this is a particularly difficult piece, and finally we end up with some testing. So this is not uncommon to see multiple projects running this sort of way, and what we will see is that value will be recognized by the company at the end of these particular projects. This is when we see our money coming in, and not until such time as we've been able to get all the testing completed and rolled out. Now, for the sake of simplicity, I'm not showing a deployment period, but there obviously is a deployment period for both of these as well. Now, contrast this with what we would suggest should be undertaken for agile projects, where our desire is, in fact, to have a greater emphasis and a greater focus placed on the projects in such a way that they are shorter and fatter. And they tend to run, at least this is our desire, if we're using shared resources, they tend to run sequentially or back to back. And of course, the focus there is on slices of value that aggregate to something that can be deployed. During these slices of value, we're still going to do analysis, we're going to do design, we're going to do coding, we're going to do testing, and we're going to do this as we've chosen to do for the vast bulk of projects at Franklin. Every 2 weeks, we're going to seek to get a series of value slices out, and we're going to do all of these activities throughout those 2 weeks. So you can see that as opposed to being activity-based, we are value delivery-based. Now, the consequences of this are multiple and somewhat profound. So let's look, first of all, I just want to bring out where the value shows up. Is just like the traditional projects, we get value when we deliver. So we have value there, and we have value here when these two projects are complete. Now, I'm sure I don't have to explain the concept of present value, that this is better to have this amount of value delivered earlier than it is to have it delivered later. Money now is worth more than money later. But there's also another subtle point to this that is illustrated through one of the animations that we have done on a spreadsheet about the case for frequent deliveries, which shows that for this period of time, we've also not just been enjoying the value that's been delivered, but every month we're in better shape because we've undoubtedly worked out the cost of delay. Meaning this is the value that accrues to the company if they have the capability right now. In the case of something like the DOL account services, this was seen as being in the vicinity of $250,000 per month. That is a lot of money. Now, the other point I want to make has to do with costs, because frequently there's a concern that agile projects have additional costs, greater costs to them. And there's no question that, we're working very hard to make our resources as efficient as possible in here to keep our costs small. And that seems like a completely reasonable thing to do that, to minimize the costs. But what typically happens is in the act of doing that, we delay the delivery of value. So the assertion I'm going to make is that though there is cost here, obviously, and there's cost here, that even though the costs of the Agile, so I'm just going to subscript these as Agile versus traditional, even if it was the case that the costs subscript Agile are greater than the costs subscript traditional, what the point I'm going to make is that the value of an Agile, the benefit that comes from an Agile perspective in terms of having the product delivered sooner versus these traditional approaches is much greater. So the value is much greater than the traditional approach, and that in fact the delta between these makes this the most important thing. Because undoubtedly, if we are able to deliver something months in advance and not just have the money in our hands and the present value of it, but actually have the accrual of the value in our hands for months in advance, this normally dwarfs the costs. And so for this reason, it is important that we establish the value, the cost of delay, if you will, of any given project so that we can do the reasonable thing, and that is to focus on a truly economic decision as opposed to blindly following the idea that if I keep my costs low, then that is a desirable outcome, when in fact, really the desirable outcome is the greatest net benefit to the company.